Hey, are you a business owner, entrepreneur, or professional? If so, we want you to apply to be a featured guest on our show. My name is Adam Torres, and I host the Mission Matters series of podcasts. I've recorded over 3,000 episodes, and we are just getting started. How do you know if you'd be a good guest to be on the show? Well, only one way to find out, and that's to apply, but I'm going to let you in on a little secret. We want guests that have a story to tell, guests with a brand, a product, or a service that can benefit my audience of listeners. If this sounds like you, go to missionmatters.com and click on Be Our Guest to apply. I'd love to talk to you and get to know more about your story. Again, head on over to missionmatters.com and click on Be Our Guest to apply. All right, now let's get into the show.
Hey, I'd like to welcome you to another episode of Mission Matters, your source for all things business. My name is Adam Torres. You can follow me on Instagram at AskAdamTorres to keep up with my book releases, book tour schedule, signings, all that other good stuff. Always love to connect with you there. And as always, if you'd like to apply to become a co-author of one of my upcoming books, just head on over to the website, missionmatters.com, and click on Become an Author to apply. All right, so today I have Wes Barefoot on the line, and he's president and owner at Path to Freedom and host of the Path to Freedom podcast. Wes, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Adam. Thanks for having me.
All right, Wes, so first off, happy to have a fellow podcaster on the line today, so excited to get into that. And definitely today's topic is going to be a good one. So can franchise ownership help you chart your path to freedom? So maybe just to get us kicked off, Wes, tell us a little bit more about Path to Freedom, please.
Yeah, sure. Happy to. Really appreciate the opportunity. So at Path to Freedom, my mission is really to help others take control of their lives and create freedom for themselves through business ownership. And I specialize in franchise business ownership. I was fortunate to get introduced to the world of franchising at a pretty early point in my career. And through that, learned a lot, met a lot of great people. That opened doors for my wife and I to get into franchise ownership ourselves. So we're multi-unit, multi-brand franchisees, and owning franchise businesses has been a huge part of us being able to create more freedom in our own lives, not only through just giving us more financial resources, but just more control over our time, our schedules, and really how we want to live our lives. And so, my goal is to really help other people understand franchising and figure out if maybe that's an avenue that would be worth them pursuing. And so that's what I do here at Path to Freedom. It's a very consultative process as I work with people. Owning a franchise is a very personal or individualized decision in terms of what type of franchise is going to be the best fit for someone. So, my process is to really get to know the people that I work with, make sure that I understand what they would be looking to accomplish through business ownership, make sure I understand how they want to spend the majority of their time as a business owner, and also make sure I understand their background, their strengths, their skill sets. And through all of that, I can help match them up with franchise businesses that are very likely to be a good fit for them and help them accomplish what they're looking to. So that's like the 30,000-foot view. The last thing I'll add, I guess, before we get into any questions is one of my favorite things about this business is that I get to provide a completely free service to the people that I work with. And Adam, if you'd like, we can get into kind of my business model if you'd like to. But for me, it's really a win-win. I get to do what I love. I get to talk about franchise ownership, and I get to help other people figure out if that could be a path that they want to go down as well.
So I'm a big fan of franchising, and I can say obviously I've been in the media business going on quite some time now, going on 5 years. And if I was thinking about going back before I started this business, I'm like, okay, so this is my first successful business, but I probably have 20 that failed before this. So
right.
That being said, I look back at my life and I'm like, man, you know what? I got lucky here, or maybe some things aligned, whatever. But those other 20 like things, I'm like, man, if I didn't even know franchising existed. And so I think a lot of people listening don't actually know that maybe franchising existed or what it looks like. So they might think, okay, McDonald's, they've heard of that, but maybe they can't afford a McDonald's. So, or some other, or Burger King. So that's what they think of. So I guess maybe just to set the stage, like what kind of franchise business opportunities are out there? Because if I'd have known about other opportunities, it's possible that I wouldn't have had those 20 failures when I was out there trying to make something up on my own when I didn't have the qualifications, the ideas, or really any business doing it.
Right. Yeah. No, it's such a good question, and it's very common. I mean, I talk to a lot of people about franchising, and some are better versed in it than others. And so one of the most common misconceptions I run into is exactly the point that you just made. When people think of franchising, they think of food businesses. And obviously food is a very large part of franchising, but there are so many options out there that are not food related when it comes to franchising. And so a lot of people may look at franchising if they're thinking of food businesses and think, well, I have no interest in getting into the food business, or, I couldn't afford to own a McDonald's or some of these other food concepts because they do require quite a bit of capital to get them up and running. And so the good news is, and where I spend a lot of my time, helping to educate people that I work with, is on the many, many other industries that franchising is very prevalent in. And many of these franchise opportunities out there do not require nearly the amount of startup capital that something like a food franchise would. So that's a lot of fun for me because, what I would say is that, for just about anyone that I work with, if they're genuinely serious about getting into business for themselves, we can find a franchise business that's going to be a great fit for them. And it may require much less capital than they're initially thinking. So just to quickly give you kind of a breakdown, I mean, you'd be hard pressed to find an industry that franchising is not, a pretty prevalent part of. So, everything from home services and home improvement to senior care to automotive to, tons of franchises that are, B2B in nature, providing services to other businesses. You have childhood education, you have the fitness sector, health and wellness. I mean, I could go on and on. So hopefully you get the gist. There's many, many options out there outside of food. So I'm glad you asked that question because it is one of the most common misconceptions that I run into.
So you've been doing this for a long time. What are some of the key advantages of starting a franchise business versus, starting a business from scratch?
Yeah, great question. And again, one where I run into, I guess what I would classify as a lot of preconceived notions, because at first glance, a lot of people might say, well, hey, you have to pay these fees up front to become a franchisee. And then most franchises are structured so that there are going to be ongoing fees as well. Usually there's a royalty, which is structured as a percentage of the franchisee's gross revenue that gets paid back to the franchisor. So a lot of people might scratch their head and say, Wes, I'm smart enough, I'm capable enough to go out and start my own business. Why would I want to pay all of these fees and be a franchisee? And the answer is very simple. It boils down to, it's kind of a cliche, but it's such a good saying when it comes to franchising. When you own a franchise business, you're in business for yourself, but not by yourself. You have someone in your corner. And so the way I've come to think about it, and this has certainly been our experience owning franchises, and I should note that we've also started businesses that are not franchises, so I do have a good comparison here. But with a franchise, it gives you the ability to run faster. And Adam, you made the point earlier, you started many businesses, not all of them were successful. And not every single franchisee is successful or has been successful or will be successful. But with a franchise, you dramatically reduce the risk of failure because you're essentially buying a blueprint to a business. And if you go through the investigative process the right way, you're allowing yourself to get in with a franchise that has a proven track record. And essentially part of what you're paying for when you pay these initial franchise fees is you're paying for the ability to not make mistakes that the franchisor and other franchisees before you have already made. So you get to avoid pitfalls, as a new franchise owner. That allows you to ramp your business up more quickly. And so a lot of people really want to focus on, the upfront costs of becoming a franchisee. And they're weighing that against, well, if I start my own business, I won't have these upfront costs. And that may be true to an extent, but in all likelihood, starting your own business, you're going to have a lot more trial and error. So that's going to cost you money. There's also the opportunity cost of, if it takes you 9 to 12 months to get your own business up and running because you're trying to figure everything out and put all the different pieces in place. Whereas with a great franchise, you can be up and running in maybe 3 or 4 months in some cases. The opportunity cost of what you're going to miss out on in revenue in many cases far outweighs the initial franchise fees. And that's not even getting into, the ongoing support that you're going to get with a great franchise system. Franchisors are very motivated to have highly successful franchisees for a long time. So you have that partner that's always there with you, helping you grow your business and helping you run it as efficiently and as effectively as possible.
So tell me about your podcast. Love introducing new podcasts to my audience. So Path to Freedom podcast. Tell us about the content and what my listeners can expect, because I definitely want them to go check it out.
Yeah, thank you so much. The podcast is something that I've had so much fun with, over the last year or so as I've been putting episodes out. So I was pretty intentional when I started the podcast. I did not want it to be only about franchising. And part of that is because, obviously owning a franchise is not the only way that you can create freedom for yourself through business ownership. There's many ways to get into business for yourself, but it can be a great way for a lot of people. But as we just talked about, so many people out there don't really understand franchising. And so if they, heard about a podcast that's only about franchising, it would probably just, a lot of people would gloss over and never pay attention. So I really wanted the podcast to appeal to anyone that is aspiring to be an entrepreneur, or to anyone that's already an entrepreneur and just looking for advice as to how they can grow their business. So, I have many successful entrepreneurs that have been guests on the podcast. Many of them are involved in franchising, but many of them are not. And so I think it's great for any aspiring entrepreneur out there to hear from other entrepreneurs and hear their story and the challenges that they've overcome to get to where they are today, because I think it's very easy for people to sit back and look at someone that's already successful as an entrepreneur and say, well, they have something that I don't have, or they know something that I don't know. But what you learn hearing from most of these successful entrepreneurs is they all started somewhere, and they all made a lot of mistakes along the way, and they've all learned a lot through those mistakes, and they're continuing to make mistakes and continuing to learn. And so my hope is that through these stories, and I share a lot of my own experience and my own stories, because believe me, I've made a lot of mistakes and will continue to do so, right? I don't have it all figured out, but my goal is really just for the podcast to be a place where aspiring entrepreneurs, as well as existing small business owners, can come to learn from others and, hopefully apply what they're learning in their own lives, ultimately helping them create more freedom for themselves.
That's awesome. So, Wes, first thing, it's been great having you on the show today. Definitely a pleasure. And I'm more educated on franchising and franchise ownership, and I'm sure my audience is as well. And looking forward to listening to your podcast also. So if somebody is listening to this right now and they want to follow up and they want to connect to learn more about Path to Freedom and maybe some of the franchise opportunities that are out there, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, thank you, Adam. So a couple ways you can get in touch with me directly. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. So you can just search Wes Barefoot on LinkedIn. Not too many Barefoots out there. So it should be pretty easy to find me there. Path to Freedom does also have a LinkedIn page as well. And then my website is www.path, it's the number 2, FRDM.com. Tons of good resources there. There's a link to the podcast on the website. There's a short form you can fill out to get in touch with me there. And then for anyone interested in the podcast, it's on any of the major podcast platforms. It's just Path, the number 2, Freedom. So search that and it'll pop right up. But, would love to talk to anyone that simply has questions and wants to learn more about, franchising. As I said before, I try to take a very consultative approach. Franchising is not for everyone, but franchising can also be great, in my experience, for so many people that never really thought of that as being a good option for them. So what I would say is, if you have that drive to go out and take more control of your life and to be a business owner, we should definitely have a conversation. I'm not guaranteeing that franchising will be right for you, but I can promise you in at least one conversation, you'll know a lot more than you did before about franchising. And, we can definitely talk through some options that might be a good fit for you. So would love to connect with anyone out there that simply wants to learn more.
Fantastic. Well, Wes, again, thank you for coming on the show. And to the audience, as always, thank you for tuning in. Hope you got a lot of value out of this. If you did, don't forget, hit that subscribe button. Definitely want you to be a return listener and visitor. And Wes, thanks again for coming on the show. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks so much, Adam.